Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere rich, fragrant, and wildly underappreciated. You're standing at the edge of a massive open-air palace courtyard in the Sahel. The air buzzes with cicadas and the slow sizzle of bubbling pots. A chef, barefoot and robed in ochre, leans over a blackened cauldron of stew so golden it seems to glow in the late afternoon sun. You catch a whiff: roasted peanuts, spicy tamarind, the earthy perfume of dried okra powder. Welcome to the royal kitchens of medieval West Africa. You probably won't survive this, because that stew you're staring at, it's not meant for commoners. It's for kings, queens, and visiting dignitaries. You, friend, are very much in the wrong line. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, post your location and local time. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You follow the scent trail through layers of heat and dust. In the empires of Ghana, Mali, and later Songhai, royal stews were more than dinner. They were declarations of power. Cooks were selected for their lineage and loyalty, their spice knowledge guarded like state secrets. The most coveted dish of all, maf, a luscious groundnut stew, thickened with crushed peanuts and blended with bitter tomato, charred onions, and a tangle of dried leaves. Mainstream historians agree that peanuts were a staple by the 14th century, brought through northern trade routes and cultivated by riverside farms under royal protection. But how they were first paired with tamarind is still debated. Some say it was by accident. Others insist a wandering griot dropped a tamarind pod into a pot during a love song. Either way, the combination stuck. Your fingers reach toward a clay bowl, warm, fragrant, and just a little oily. This is not the watery stew of your average peasant. This is stew cooked low and slow, using baobab bark to fuel a smoky flame. A stew you eat with your hands, scooping it up with balls of millet dough, burning your fingertips just a little. The golden hue, from crushed near seeds, fermented into a pungent black paste so strong that first-time eaters often mistake it for spoiled food. But give it a second taste. It's the backbone of flavor in these kitchens, umami before the word existed. And if you were royal, your stew came layered. Smoked guinea fowl at the base, wild okra in the middle, groundnut and tomato on top. And then there's the ritual. You don't just eat this stew. You receive it. A servant kneels, head bowed. You nod. A second servant fans flies away with woven fronds. Music plays softly behind you. Chorus strings tuned just sharp enough to cut through the humid air. Fringe records from travelers like Leo Africanus mention stew so thick a spoon could stand on its own, and dishes red as a setting sun. Whether those descriptions were literal or poetic, historians still argue whether the golden stews were primarily for daily royal consumption or strictly reserved for events like harvest festivals and diplomatic summits. And yes, every spoonful had hierarchy. The top layer of oil, reserved for the eldest matron of the court. The piece of smoked meat closest to the bone. Only the king touches that. You might be offered broth and a knowing look. Maybe. There's a whisper among the cooks about a stew so rich it once cost a royal treasury 2 full camels worth of salt and spices. It included wild mushrooms, now extinct, turtle eggs, and a splash of fermented palm wine. You won't find that on any surviving menu. It exists only in memory, recited by kitchen apprentices during new moon feasts. You lean against a pillar, watching the steam rise, the scent curling into the twilight like a spell. Somewhere, a rooster crows. It's midnight, so either it's confused or that bird just smelled the stew and decided to reincarnate early. A final taste. You press your fingers into the soft millet bowl, scoop up the last swirl of stew, and feel the heat bloom across your tongue. You're not just eating. You're absorbing centuries of culinary politics, sacred kitchen hierarchies, and flavors too bold for modern menus. Your stomach's warm. Your eyes are half closed. The golden stew has done its job. You're still standing in that courtyard, though the sun has long melted into a bruised blue horizon. The drums have quieted, but the smoke still curls skyward from a small cooking pit near the palace's southern wall. A group of royal kitchen apprentices hunch over banana leaves, unwrapping bundles like they're sacred scrolls. And in a way, they are. Inside each is a slab of smoked Nile perch, dark as midnight and shimmering with oil. Tonight, you meet the fish that crowned emperors. In the ancient kingdoms flanking the Niger River, Mali, Jo, and Songhai, fish wasn't just a protein, it was a privilege. And smoked fish, that was the elite tier. The Nile perch, a muscular, almost prehistoric creature, wasn't caught casually. It was hunted, practically worshipped. Its arrival at the court was a small parade in itself, with fishmongers bowing and palace guards inspecting each scale for imperfections. The smoking process was brutal and precise. Firewood had to be carefully selected, mango for a sweet burn, shea for a nutty depth. The fish was cleaned, then bathed in a brine of crushed pepper, wild mint, and a dash of vinegar made from spoiled hibiscus tea. Then came the smoke. Not hours, days. You'd see rows of them lined like armor, glistening above the flames, until their flesh was a deep maroon and their scent carried across entire city districts. Mainstream historians know the trade routes along the Niger were as vital for fish as for gold. Smoked fish was portable, long-lasting, and high value, sent in clay jars sealed with beeswax to distant cousins of kings and even rival courts. Some scrolls even mention it as part of bridal dowries, tucked between bolts of indigo-dyed cotton and carved ivory combs. But there's one fringe belief whispered by griots and old cooks alike, that the fish wasn't merely food. Some believe that the bones carried messages, that if you cracked a perch vertebra just right, it would whisper fortunes about wars and love. Historians, understandably, still argue whether this was metaphorical or the result of fermented hallucinations from the smoking huts. Still, you watch an elder chef now, her hands steady, eyes soft, as she slices a piece of the smoked fish onto a carved wooden plate. A drizzle of palm oil, a crumble of sun-dried tomatoes. No fanfare, just reverence. She nods. Fit for a king, she murmurs. But tonight, for you. You take a bite. The first thing you notice is the texture. Firm, almost leathery at the edge, then giving way to soft flakes inside. Rich, dense, deeply savory. Not salty in the way you expect. More like ancient sea and forest smoke had a baby and fed it pepper until it bit back. There's a sweetness too, subtle but insistent, like someone kissed the fish with molasses and forgot to mention it. You try not to hum as you chew, and it wasn't always eaten plain. In the city of Jen, they mashed it with fermented rice and onion ash to create a fish cake so pungent that guests were warned 3 days in advance. In Imperial Jo, it was sometimes served chilled. Yes, chilled, in pits lined with river ice and paired with pickled mangoes and cola leaf paste. And if you were particularly bold, you'd eat it with a spoonful of ground pepper paste so fiery it made grown warriors cry. Not metaphorically. There's a well-known tale of a general who tried to impress the queen by swallowing 3 helpings in a row. He passed out for 12 hours and missed an entire coup attempt. The queen ruled solo for a week and liked it. Smoked fish also played a quiet political role. Gifting a rival court an especially fatty slab was both a gesture of friendship and a subtle flex. Look what we can afford to not eat, the unspoken message said. In one case, a dispute between 2 merchant princes was resolved by a 3-day fish smoking competition. The winner? A woman named Kunter, whose smoked perch still features in village songs today. And here's where it gets even stranger. Some royal chef swore that smoking fish at night, only at night, gave it a moon flavor. Soft, elusive, and slightly sweet. Scientific? Probably not. Delicious? Absolutely. And if it got the king smiling at breakfast, who were you to question it? You tear another strip off the leaf. Your fingers glisten. Your breath smells like royalty. Or maybe river ghost. Hard to say. The fires are dying down now. A kitchen boy fans the coals and hums softly, a tune passed down through kitchen lines older than some dynasties. The smoked perch sits warm in your belly, heavy with history and the smell of ancient waters. And somewhere in the shadows, a griot mutters to his drum. Kings may forget battles, but never a perfect fish. You wake, or maybe you never quite slept, with something cold and citrusy melting on your tongue. A shock at first, like a tart snowflake landing square on your taste buds. It's a sorbet, but not just any frozen treat. This is Baobab sorbet, 1 spoon from chilled clay pots in the innermost courts of West African queens. You're in a shaded palace alcove now, woven canopy above, the faint trickle of a courtyard fountain behind you. Someone passes a good bowl into your hands. It's heavy, cool to the touch. The aroma? Sharp, lemony, with a whisper of something wild. Maybe tamarind, maybe just mischief. This is what royalty tasted when the world was too hot to think straight. Baobab, the tree of life, is more than a tree out here. It's a landmark, a symbol, a pantry, and apparently, dessert. Its fruit, encased in a fuzzy pod, is dry and chalky at first. But grind it down, mix it with honey, chilled water, and the pulp of bush mangoes, and you get a frozen dish so lip-puckeringly bright that even palace dignitaries were known to flinch, then grin. The process of making this sorbet began long before dessert time. Young kitchen girls would climb the sacred baobabs at dawn, not pluck the fruit, but negotiate with it. Soft songs, gloved hands, hushed voices. The trees were believed to listen. And woe unto the cook who angered them. Sorbet that didn't freeze properly was blamed on spirits, not technique. Mainstream scholars agree that baobab pulp was commonly consumed in liquid form as a vitamin-rich tonic. But this icy, ceremonial version was exclusive to royalty, particularly queens and noblewomen. According to 14th century oral histories, chilled baobab desserts were reserved for moon feasts, fertility blessings, and palace spa rituals. Yes, spa rituals. Even queens needed a break. So how did they freeze anything in a climate that could cook a yam on the windowsill? Enter clay pot science. Large terracotta vessels, porous and designed for evaporation, were buried at night beneath layers of damp cloth and river stones. Wind tunnels, dug into palace floors, kept air moving across the clay surface, drawing heat out and creating a primitive refrigeration system. No joke. Some historians call it Africa's first fridge. Of course, whether that actually dropped the sorbet below 0 degrees Celsius. Historians still argue whether the cold was literal or simply cool enough to impress visiting dignitaries from hotter regions. Fringe tales go further. One story claims a Fulani queen once had an ice merchant ride 6 camels from a Saharan oasis carrying salt-packed snow wrapped in goatskin. His only job? To deliver ice for her birthday sorbet. He made it, barely, and was given a turban lined with gold thread and permission to marry 3 kitchen attendants of his choosing. Lucky man. But flavor wasn't just about temperature. Baobab pulp is naturally sour, so cooks balanced it with wild honey, sometimes laced with hibiscus syrup or fermented date juice. Some even added a whisper of ash. Yes, literal wood ash, from sacred incense trees, believed to cleanse the tongue and open the mind. Let's assume they used that pot sparingly. You taste it now. Bright and acidic, then mellow, almost floral. There's a grittiness, but in a good way, like the memory of a dry mango or really bold lemonade. It wakes you up. It also might make your jaw tingle, just slightly. And texture, not quite ice cream. More like a snowball that's been blessed by a forest spirit. Light, then chewy, then gone. The palace girls laugh as they serve it. One teases a guard, slipping a second helping into his bowl when the queen isn't looking. Sorbet here isn't solemn. It's joy in edible form. A moment of relief in a life filled with ceremony and heat. Some records from Arab travelers noted cold fruit mashings with peculiar sourness at West African courts, though it's unclear whether they loved it or were just politely baffled. What's certain is that sorbet wasn't just a dessert. It was a luxury that required planning, trust, and weather patterns to align. A royal indulgence that whispered, "We have time and power enough to make even the sun step aside for dessert." You lick the spoon clean. It's carved bone, polished smooth from decades of use. Maybe centuries. A delicate flower is etched into the handle. Baobab blossom, of course. You consider slipping it into your pocket, but think better of it. The queen probably knows exactly how many she owns. As the last spoonful melts on your tongue, the air feels cooler, the stars brighter. Someone starts playing a soft melody on a wooden flute. The kind of sound that makes you forget what century it is. You lean back against the pillar, eyes half closed, mouth tingling, royal sorbet dreams humming gently through your bones. The moment the lid is lifted from the bowl, your eyes water, not from beauty, though the dish is plated with care, but from the immediate wall of steam and spice that hits your sinuses like a friendly slap. Welcome to the court's most dangerous appetizer, pepper soup. The name is misleading. This isn't a soup with pepper in it. This is pepper that happens to have a little soup clinging to it. Tonight, you're in the royal diplomatic chambers of the Benin Kingdom, and negotiations are about to begin, not with scrolls or swords, but with steaming bowls of goat meat, cloves, and pure volcanic fire. In many West African courts, pepper soup wasn't merely a warm-up course. It was a trial, a test, a tool. Visiting emissaries were welcomed with it, and sometimes judged by how they handled the heat. If you slurped it casually and reached for more, the palace took notice. If you wept, gagged, or passed out, as one unfortunate delegate from Al-Andalus once did, well, your credibility took a hit. The main base is broth. Yes, but calling it liquid feels generous. It's a thin film that floats around generous hunks of meat, organs, and on festive days, snails the size of a clenched fist. The spice blend, that's where the magic lives. Calabash nutmeg, alligator pepper, Ouda pods, and the infamous Scotch bonnet, each one a firework in disguise. And in royal kitchens, there was always one extra ingredient: secrecy. The head chef alone knew the full spice ratio. Some suspected it changed daily to throw off potential food tasters. Mainstream historians confirmed that pepper soup was central to ceremonial meals, particularly in Yoruba and Edo traditions. It stimulated the appetite, cleared the senses, and, let's be honest, shut up anyone talking too much during a delicate alliance dinner. But the fringe theories, oh, they're delicious. Some griots tell of talking soup, pepper broth so strong it induced dreams. You'd drink a bowl at the threshold of a decision. To go to war, to marry, to flee. If the heat made your vision blur and ancestors appeared, that was your answer. Historians still argue whether these reports describe ritual trances, or just the result of one too many Scotch bonnets. You watch now as a royal steward ladles a serving into your bowl. The meat is goat, bone-in, chopped with reckless abandon. The broth has flecks of oil dancing at the top like fire sprites. Your spoon hovers. Your pride prepares itself. The first sip is deceptively gentle. Warm, meaty, earthy. Then it hits. The heat builds, climbs, and explodes behind your eyes like a drum solo. Your scalp tingles. Your lips go numb. You feel your ancestors high-fiving each other across time. And somehow, it's good. Not just spicy, flavorful. The kind of dish that demands your attention. The cloves bring a wintry warmth. The nutmeg hums in the background. And deep beneath it all is something bitter, smoky, maybe burnt bark, or dried root that hasn't been used in 100 years. You don't ask. It's better that way. Across the chamber, a delegate from a rival kingdom wipes his brow and tries to smile. You lock eyes and raise your spoon in solidarity. He raises his. Both of you are sweating profusely. The queen pretends not to notice, but you catch the tiniest smirk. In some courts, pepper soup bowls were carved with symbols, sun spirals for good luck, jaguar teeth for bravery. And drinking it was a ritual. 3 sips, pause. 3 sips, off for toast. One final gulp, followed by a riddle. Get the riddle wrong? No more soup. Get it right? Second helping. There's a story about one prince who refused to eat pepper soup at his coronation. Claimed it was undignified. The court erupted in outrage. He was crowned anyway, but spent the rest of his reign with a nickname Cold Tongue. Brutal. You mop your forehead with a napkin and take another bite. The goat meat is fall-apart tender, infused with fire and history. You chase it with a small cube of palm sugar, passed discreetly under the table. Sweet mercy. And here's the thing. This soup wasn't just for diplomats or royalty. Sometimes, when a ruler needed to know who they could trust, they served it to their council. The one who flinched. Suspect. The one who smiled through the sweat and asked for seconds. That's your general. As the bowl empties, your mouth sings with lingering heat. Your eyes shine, your pulse is steady, and your respect for West African spice tolerance has quadrupled. A final wisp of steam escapes the clay bowl. Somewhere, drums begin again. Softer now. You made it. You survived the trial. And in a strange way, you feel purified. Like the pepper scrubbed something off your soul. Your tongue still tingling when you're ushered toward the royal rice ovens. Not that ovens exist yet. Exactly. But there, near the eastern walls of the palace, enormous iron pots rest half-buried in coal ash, simmering with something that smells like the memory of every good dinner you've ever had. You've arrived at the birth of flavor diplomacy, where West Africa's rice roads forged empires and, yes, gave rise to the precursors of jollof. But not the kind you're picturing. No tomatoes yet. No stock cubes. This is pre-colonial jollof, royal rice, laced with local spices like grains of paradise, crushed meligeta pepper, and the occasional dash of charcoal dust for character. You pee inside the pot. It's a mosaic of color, rich bronze rice grains, flecked with green from wild bitterleaf, slivers of dried onion, and glistening red pepper oil floating on top like a warning sign. If yesterday's pepper soup was a dare, this rice is a declaration. The kingdom of Wallo, in what is now Senegal, once controlled vast tracts of rice-growing land. Their royal families considered rice not just a staple but a source of power. They mapped their influence by how far their rice dishes traveled, north into Morocco, east into Hausa lands, and south toward forest kingdoms. Each rice grain was a whisper of empire. Mainstream historians widely agree that indigenous African rice, Oryza glaberrima, was domesticated millennia ago and thrived in marshy fields under female leadership. Yes, the best rice farmers, women. Matrilineal dynasties often put entire estates under their supervision, and royal chefs knew better than to question a rice matron's advice on cook times. But how these ancient rice dishes eventually became what we now call jollof is still debated. Some scholars argue the name descends from the Wolof people. Others suggest it was named after the Jollof Empire that dominated 14th to 16th century Senegal. What everyone agrees on, it was a dish of pride. And in the courts, it was a culinary showstopper. Tonight, it's being served with roasted guinea fowl and a spicy tomato ginger sauce. Not the bright red stuff you might find in modern kitchens, but a deeper, rust-colored reduction made with smoked tomatoes, wild basil, and something bitter you can't quite place. Charred okra, maybe? No one's telling. And here's where things get sneaky. Each palace had its own rice recipe. Some used goat stock. Others relied on fermented fish paste, or dried aguzi seeds, or even, brace yourself, boiled antelope marrow. If you were a royal guest and got served the wrong rice style, that was a message. Either you weren't important enough to warrant the good rice, or the palace was making a diplomatic jab. One written account from a Portuguese trader in the 1500s claimed that a Wolof prince once walked out of a banquet in protest. His rice had been flavored with North African cumin, and he considered it an insult to the ancestors. Dramatic? Sure, but rice was serious business. You take a spoonful. Yes, you're allowed now. The rice is firm, almost chewy, and smoky from the clay pot. It clings together but never gets mushy. Each bite has heat, then tang, then a burst of umami that's almost meaty despite being fully vegetarian. It's rice elevated to myth. There's a fringe belief that one empress in ancient Ghana used to keep a bowl of rice under her bed. Not to eat, but to collect dreams. She believed that the rice would absorb visions overnight and help her advisors interpret omens. Probably not very sanitary, but undeniably poetic. In some kitchens, rice was cooked in 3 stages. The first for the ancestors, burnt and buried under the pot. The second for the court, served hot and fragrant. The third was left out for the spirits of the market, those mischievous forces that controlled trade winds and the quality of imported cloves. Whether this division was religious or just practical food storage, historians still argue. As you finish your bowl, a hush falls across the courtyard. A servant clears your dish and bows. Not deeply, but respectfully. You've eaten the rice. You've passed another test. Now imagine, the same dish, 500 years later, becomes the subject of international food debates, with entire countries playfully at war over who makes the best jollof. The irony, none of them would dare serve this ancient version. Too smoky, too bitter, too complex. But here, in the heart of the palace, it was divine. You feel full, not just in the belly, but in the way a good story fills your head. The rice lingers on your tongue, leaving behind a spice you can't name, and a question you can't quite answer. You lean back, exhale. Royal rice is no joke. By now, your taste buds are halfway to retirement, and you'd think the palace might give you a break. But no, a steward waves you over to the next courtyard kitchen, where a large brass vat bubbles thickly over open flame, filling the air with a scent unlike anything before. Deep, earthy, slightly sweet, and unmistakably red. This is not just another dish. This is the soul of the royal kitchen. You've arrived at the epicenter of West African cuisine, the palm oil pot. Hey, the food isn't just about taste. It's about color, ceremony, and control. And at the heart of all that is red palm oil, sometimes called liquid gold, other times just the reason your robe is permanently stained. Pressed from the fruit of the oil palm tree, this substance was more than a cooking fat. It was political currency, sacred medium, and taste signature. In royal courts from the Bight of Benin to the Ashanti palaces, palm oil appeared in everything. Sauces, stews, grilled meat rubs, and even healing balms. It made the difference between a commoner's meal and a king's feast. The smell alone was enough to start fights. In the palace of Oyo, there's a story about two chefs who dueled over palm oil batches. One claimed his was blessed by the ancestors. The other said his came from a tree that bloomed under a blood moon. The king, wisely, made them cook for him. Then he chose both and married one. Historians still argue whether it was the oil or the cook he loved more. You lean over the pot. The oil bubbles thickly around cubes of yam and goat tripe, glistening orange-red, spicy fumes curling upward like mischievous spirits. One kitchen boy fans the flames with a woven tray, while another tosses in a handful of something you swear is powdered shrimp, though he grins and refuses to confirm. Mainstream historians document palm oil as a staple ingredient, especially in royal contexts. It was used to signify wealth and abundance. To cook without it, especially at court, would be like hosting a state dinner without candles. Technically possible, socially suicidal. And yet, palm oil was also sacred. In some kingdoms, the first pressing from a season's harvest was reserved entirely for ritual. It was poured into ancestral shrines, used to anoint drums before battles, and smeared on the lips of newborn princes to teach them the taste of power. Here's something even stranger. In Dahomey, they use palm oil not just to flavor dishes but to encode messages. A dish with double oil? Urgent. Oil only in the center. Caution. Oil stirred counterclockwise. An invitation. Stirred clockwise. A veiled threat. Fringe scholars call this culinary semaphore. Kitchen signals embedded in cuisine. It's half joke, half legend. And no, there's no recipe book. Tonight's dish is called ofe akwu, a thick, simmered stew of palm oil, ogbono seeds, goat meat, and crushed tomatoes. Think lava, but edible. The texture is slick, almost silky. You dip a piece of soft yam into the sauce and watch it disappear, leaving only a red sheen behind. You lift it to your mouth. Immediate flavor explosion. Smoky, meaty, tangy, and just a little dangerous. Your fingers now match the stew. Everything glows orange. That's the price of entry. The courtiers around you don't flinch. They eat with the same care as one might read scripture. Palm oil dishes are respected. Some even call them tongue paint, because once you taste it, it colors your entire palate. Permanently. And yet, beneath all that richness lies a subtle power play. Palm oil production was often controlled by royal women, queens, priestesses, and market chiefs. They decided when to press, how much to sell, and to whom. Royal kitchens were often at the mercy of their decisions, and more than one war was delayed due to an oil shortage that suspiciously ended once proper tribute was paid. You chew slowly, listening to the oil pop in the pot, watching the stew thicken by the minute. It's not just cooking, it's a conversation. A back and forth between land, history, and heat. Some griots say that palm oil is what separates mortals from spirits. That if you eat too much of it in one sitting, you'll dream too deeply and forget which world you belong to. You chuckle, then pause. That might explain a few things from earlier tonight. The bowl is nearly empty now. Your lips glisten, your fingers are orange, and somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat picks up again. It's softer this time. Maybe the oil has made the air more viscous. You glance around at the royal chefs. They are watching you, not judging, just making sure you understand. Palm oil isn't just an ingredient. It's an oath, a bond, a reminder that even flavor has a throne. And this, right here, is where it rules. You think you've settled into the rhythm of royal dining. Spice, smoke, stew, repeat. But now you're led away from the heat and into a long, low chamber built of clay and cool stone. It smells different here, sharper, drier. There's no bubbling pot, no crackling fire, just long wooden racks, rows of sealed goods, and an unmistakable scent of beef jerky. Not quite. This is the palace smokehouse. Welcome to the secret culinary vaults of the Songhai elite, where salt, smoke, and song turn simple meat into royal treasure. The Songhai Empire, at its peak in the 15th and 16th centuries, was a marvel of order, discipline, and flavor. And their rulers were obsessed with preservation, not just of knowledge and culture, but of meat. Preserved food was strategy. It fed armies. It fed ambassadors. It fed entire courts during long stretches of fasting or festival. Salted beef strips, sun-dried camel meat, and delicately smoked mutton were all considered delicacies, especially when aged with care. The technique wasn't improvised, it was inherited, passed down through butchers and smokers who were more priest than cook. And yes, singing was part of the ritual. Mainstream historians confirm the scale of Songhai's meat preservation industry, especially around Jao and Timbuktu, where camel caravans brought salt from Tagaza, a shimmering white slab town in the Sahara. Salt was currency. Salt was power. Salt was survival. But the fringe accounts, that's where things get smoky. Some griots speak of flavor chants, melodies sung while the meat cured, said to affect the taste. Deep low notes for beef, high, trilling ones for goat. One even claimed a butcher could sing a hamstring into tenderness. Historians still argue whether this practice had any real effect, or if it was just a way to make 12 hours of meat hanging a bit less boring. You walk down the aisle of drying racks. Slabs of meat hang in shadows, deep red and gleaming with preserved oils. One chef offers you a slice, thin, brittle at the edge, but soft inside. The flavor is intense, salty, smoky, and tinged with something almost floral. Is that coriander smoke? Turns out, the choice of wood was everything. Royal smokers hoarded acacia bark, orange peels, dried cola husks, and even old leather sandals. Yes, sandals. Not to smoke the meat directly, but to infuse the smokehouse floor with a subtle musk, the scent of kings, one old steward mutters with a wink. You try not to think too hard about that part. But one serious debate has persisted through time: acacia versus mango wood. Acacia burns hotter, faster, with a clean finish. Mango burns slowly, with a fruity undertone that lingers in the meat. Some kings swore by mango. Others banned it, citing frivolous flavors. The resulting divide became known as the Flavor Wood War. And yes, it was very real. Historians in modern-day Mali still bicker about which side won. You take another slice of meat, now dipped in a sauce made from fermented tamarind and wild pepper. The tang is electric. Your lips pucker. Your brain lights up. This wasn't just survival food. This was strategy. The Songhai knew that if you could control meat, you could control morale. When diplomats visited from the north, they weren't gifted gold or wives. They were gifted a leather satchel filled with meat so potent, it had to be sliced with a knife blessed by the local imam. Some palace kitchens had entire smoked cellars below ground. Cool, dry, and nearly silent except for the soft creak of the hanging hooks and, of course, the low hum of song. You can almost hear it now. A lullaby in an unfamiliar language, drifting between the racks. The meat is gone, but its taste lingers. Salt on your lips. smoke in your hair. You realize this food wasn't just meant to be eaten. It was meant to be remembered. One last detail before you leave. A slab of what looks like stone sits in the corner. You lean in. It's meat. Petrified. Hardened over decades. According to the steward, it's a royal cut from the reign of Askia Muhammad himself. Preserved as a relic, touched only during coronations and, allegedly, during moments of national crisis. You leave the chamber blinking. The air outside tastes sweeter. Or maybe you just got used to living in smoke and song. Either way, you're officially smoked. As your senses return from the salted dreamscape of the smoke haze, you're greeted by something far more thunderous. A rhythm pounds through the palace grounds. Thwack, 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 followed by cheers, laughter, and the unmistakable sound of something heavy and starchy being mercilessly beaten into submission. Welcome to Fufu Wrestling and the Yam Feasts of West African royalty. Hope you've stretched. You're led to a wide, open square within the palace complex. The sun is just starting to slide toward the horizon, casting long golden shadows across dozens of enormous mortars, each paired with a heavy pestle taller than a child. Around them, teams of palace servants, cooks, and volunteer villagers pound yams with coordinated muscle and surprising flair. This is no quiet kitchen prep. This is performance art. And the center ring? Reserved for the royal fufu champions. Fufu, if you haven't met it before, is a dough-like staple made from yam, cassava, or plantain, pounded into a sticky, elastic texture that's simultaneously filling and strangely addictive. It's the unsung hero of West African meals, acting like a starchy sponge to soak up every stew, sauce, and ceremonial gravy. And at court, it was an event. Mainstream historians agree that yam cultivation and pounding were central to many West African culinary traditions, particularly in the forest kingdoms, Akan, Yoruba, Igbo, and others. What they don't always mention, just how competitive it got. You're watching now as two palace teams square off in what looks less like cooking and more like a culinary WWE match. Each team has a drummer, a hype person, and a technique. One uses synchronized pounding, 4 pestles moving in an elegant crisscross rhythm. The other, raw speed and noise, maximum chaos. Neither team is smiling. This is serious. A plate is passed to you, fresh, piping hot yam fufu, steaming slightly in the cool air. It's been shaped into a tight sphere, firm but yielding. Beside it, a shallow dish of aguzi stew made with melon seeds, bitter greens, and just enough chili to make you nervous. You pinch a bit of fufu between your fingers. The texture is alien, bouncy, elastic, almost too warm. You dip it into the stew, swirl, and pop it in your mouth. Oh, wow. It's soft and chewy, but somehow cleansing. The stew coats it perfectly, clinging to the surface like it was meant to be there. A brief burst of spice, followed by earthy depth, and then that slow yam sweetness at the end. It's the edible equivalent of getting a hug while someone fans you gently. Fringe accounts mention how yam pounding wasn't just about dinner. It was tied to fertility, prosperity, and even military strength. A well-pounded fufu indicated a healthy harvest, a strong community, and, if you believe the griots, a king who could conquer hearts and empires alike. And yes, the pounding contests had winners. Some kingdoms held fufu festivals, where the champion pounders received royal cloth, ivory spoons, or even marriage proposals. The Ashanti are said to have crowned one cook queen of the mortar after a record-breaking 7 hours of uninterrupted yam demolition. But let's get weirder. Historians still argue whether some royal courts deliberately underpounded their fufu during times of mourning. The logic? Softness equals joy. Overly stiff fufu was a culinary symbol of grief. It's not widely confirmed, but some oral historians point to a legendary funeral where the fufu was so famed, it had to be served with knives. Mourning indeed. Back in the courtyard, the competition ends with cheers. One team lifts their pestles in triumph. The other sulks, but only briefly, because now the feast begins. Wooden trays appear from nowhere. Giant bowls of fufu, sculpted like mountains. Stews of peanut, spinach, tomato, abono, and palm oil. smoked meats, spiced snails. The air turns into a festival of scent. You eat with your hands. Everyone does. Even the king, seated under a gold-canopied throne, leans forward with his fingers glistening. Somewhere nearby, a child pounds their own tiny mortar with surprising aggression. You smile. The next fufu champion in training. And in that moment, it's clear. Fufu isn't just a side dish. It's history you can chew. A conversation held in rhythm and motion. A symbol of unity, labor, and, when made just right, absolute pleasure. You wipe your fingers on a woven cloth, belly full, jaw relaxed from all the chewing. The sun has fully set now, but the yams glow like treasure in the firelight. You're not just fed. You've been initiated. You're sitting under a mango tree now, its wide arms stretching lazily across the courtyard like it, too, is settling in for the evening. Fireflies flirt with the dusk. Somewhere, a griot begins to hum. And in your hand, delicately balanced in a shallow gourd dish, is the royal answer to dessert. Fermented millet pudding, drizzled with a syrup so fragrant it smells like someone melted an orchard. This is Kunuzaki's sophisticated cousin. A dish less about indulgence, more about memory and digestion. Fermented millet dishes have long been culinary staples across West Africa, particularly among Hausa, Fulani, and Zama communities. In royal circles, though, the pudding version, called Furadie Nono or a dozen local names depending on the region, was elevated into a slow, meditative treat. Served cold, always cold. You give it a gentle swirl. The texture is halfway between yogurt and clay, a little intimidating. But the smell, sour milk, crushed dates, a hint of cinnamon bark, invites you in. The first spoonful is shocking. It's tangy, slightly fizzy from fermentation, and has a grainy texture that dissolves like wet sand on the tongue. Then comes the sweetness, a date honey syrup that cuts through the sour with the precision of a palace dagger. You blink. It's not what you expected. It's better. Mainstream historians agree that millet was the grain of kings long before rice and maize arrived. Hardy, drought-resistant, and deeply tied to the land, it was used in everything from beer to porridge to ceremonial cakes. But its royal transformation into a dessert was clever, a way to show that kings didn't just survive the harsh Sahel, they thrived in it. And here's the quirky part. Fermentation wasn't just a flavor choice. In many palace kitchens, it was also a purification ritual. One fringe account tells of a queen's cook who refused to serve fresh milk under any circumstances. Only sour things keep the court sweet, he insisted. Whether that's microbial wisdom or just superstition, historians still argue. But the royal records from Kano mention 7-day milk, aged exactly 1 week, stirred at dawn by a left-handed girl for luck. That's a recipe note you don't forget. In some palaces, fermented pudding was also symbolic. Offered to guests on their final day of a royal visit, it represented closure, the last spoon of the journey, as one proverb puts it. Smooth, calming, a gentle fade after the fireworks of feasts and speeches. The flavor was subtle, but its message clear. You are full, and you are on it. And make no mistake, serving it properly mattered. The bowl had to be good, not clay. The spoon? Carved from baobab or, if you were lucky, horn. Ice was a status flex. If your pudding arrived chilled to the touch, it meant the palace respected you enough to dig into their evaporative coolers and sacrifice the best stone-lined jars. There's even a legend, half silly, half sinister, about a visiting noble who insulted the pudding, calling it goat's gruel. That night, his entourage was served only dry couscous and warm water. The message? Respect the millet. You finished the last bite. It settled something in you. Not just your stomach, but your pace. Your thoughts. You breathe more slowly now. The pudding has a way of pulling you back from the chaos of meat, smoke, and spice. It whispers, we're almost done. You can rest now. One of the palace attendants hands you a cloth to wipe your fingers. She offers a knowing smile. Everyone here knows the role this dish plays. It's dessert, yes, but it's also a lullaby. Before you can thank her, she refills your bowl. Because sometimes, even royalty needs a second helping. Somewhere, A flute weaves a melody so thin it feels like mist. The stars have emerged overhead, scattering silver dust across the night sky. And now, for the first time since your journey began, you're not eating in the palace courtyard, but beneath it. You're led down narrow stairs carved directly into the packed earth, lit by flickering oil lamps and cooled by stone walls. This is the root cellar, the beating, breathing pantry of the royal household, and the place where ancient condiments waited in the dark. You didn't think kings had condiments. Oh, friend, if you could time travel just to steal one thing from West African kitchens, you'd make off with the spice jars. In front of you sit rows of tightly sealed pots. Some hum with fermented heat. Others ooze a slow, pungent sweetness. There are pastes, powders, infusions, each one with a job, a personality, a short temper. You're about to taste the hidden side of royal cooking, the flavor architects. First up, Ayaru, fermented locust beans. Tiny, shriveled, intensely aromatic. They smell like a mixture of blue cheese, old rain, and roasted nuts. And somehow, that's exactly what royal stews needed. You're handed a single bean on a flat stone. You taste it. Immediate reaction. This should not be delicious. And yet, it is. Sharp, funky, umami-rich. Like a whole forest decided to become a soy sauce. Mainstream historians trace Ayaru across centuries of Yoruba and Edo cooking. It was a staple for flavoring egusi soups and red stews. And yes, it featured heavily in palace cuisine, because one drop could transform an entire pot. It was known as kitchen thunder. And speaking of thunder, here comes the tamarind ash relish. You dip your finger into a small gourd filled with a thick, dark brown paste. It's bitter, smoky. There's a citrusy bite that grabs your jaw and doesn't let go. This wasn't a sauce you casually slathered. This was an accent, a weapon, a whisper of shadow added to white fish or yam porridge. It made food taste older, wiser, haunted. Now you're starting to understand why royal chefs were held in such high regard. They weren't just cooks. They were chemists, therapists, spellcasters. You're told some would intentionally rest condiments underground for years. Yes, years, to develop their funk. There's a jar here sealed in beeswax that might be older than several nations. You don't ask for a sample. Then comes the unexpected, sweet spiced oil, made from roasted tiger nuts, bush honey, and crushed cinnamon leaf. It's floral, nutty, and drizzled over grilled fruit or stirred into rice porridge for the morning after a royal banquet. It's dessert shy cousin. You offered a spoonful. It coats your tongue in velvet. And just when you think you've seen everything, the steward lifts a cloth to reveal red termite salt. Yes, salt, made from termites. Fringe historians claim it was a delicacy among the Hausa nobility. Termites will be collected from mound clusters after a rainstorm, roasted with river herbs, and pulverized into a powder that tasted like earth, lightning, and tears of joy. You taste a pinch, and you immediately understand. Historians still argue whether this was widely consumed or purely ceremonial, but scroll from Kano and Zoria mention spirit salt used in high feasts. Its rarity made it political. If your food was seasoned with it, someone in the palace liked you. A lot. Throughout this cellar, everything tells a story. The sealed pots aren't labeled, but the stewards know each one by scent alone. You watch as one sniffs 3 in a row, nodding solemnly each time. These are the secret ingredients of diplomacy, of seduction, of war councils and coronation meals. And you begin to realize, while meat and rice and yams strutted across the banquet table, these condiments worked in the shadows, quietly turning meals into memories, dishes into declarations. You take a last glance around. Clay jars gleam softly in the lamplight. A pot of fermented cassava vinegar bubbles gently in the corner, as if whispering secrets to itself. Then you climb the steps back to the surface, your mouth still tingling from flavors you never expected to find. Upstairs, the air feels different, brighter, sharper, as if every taste bud just graduated from a royal academy. The sun is gone now, fully replaced by a soft dome of stars. Somewhere beyond the courtyard walls, distant drumming rolls like thunder in reverse, slow, soft, gathering. You step carefully across a woven mat into a quieter space of the palace, this one lit with lanterns and lined with long cushions. And here, at last, comes the part of the feast not meant for your stomach but for your spirit. The royal brews and mood elixirs, passed around in carved calabash bowls, steaming gently in the cool night air. One of the oldest drinks you'll meet tonight is pito, a sorghum-based beer that's thick, malty, and vaguely sour, brewed by royal brewers, usually women, who inherited the right from their grandmothers. Pito isn't just a refreshment, it's a ritual. It's served in silence before a decision, sipped slowly when a guest is being evaluated. And in some courts, it's stirred exactly 7 times with a twig from a sacred tree before being poured. Mainstream historians trace pito back thousands of years, brewed in calabashes in Hausa, Dagomba, and Akan societies. It was light on alcohol, but heavy on symbolism. A royal council meeting without pito? Not happening. Some kings refused to speak until they had a bowl in hand. But there's more tonight. A fresh drink is passed your way, cloudy, fragrant, and warm. You take a sip and blink. It's kunuaya, a tiger nut milk drink, naturally sweet, flavored with ginger and cloves, and chilled just enough to be suspiciously perfect. The taste is soothing. Like Holkita's smarter, sassier cousin. You immediately feel your heart rate drop. This wasn't dessert. It was medicinal. Royal brews were designed to reset the body, especially after spicy or heavy meals. The palace apothecaries worked closely with chefs, designing infusions of bitter herbs, citrus peels, or floral teas made with hibiscus and lemongrass. One drink was said to cool the blood, another to lengthen dreams. You wonder what you just drank. Then comes Barukutu, the earthier cousin of pito, made from fermented maize or millet. It's served stronger, darker, and with less ceremony. This was the drink of soldiers and generals, of tough decisions and midnight strategies. The brew is dense, slightly fizzy, with an aftertaste like toasted bread and old iron. It warms the throat, then the chest, then the bones. Fringe records mention that in some royal households, drinking games accompanied the birukutu, but not the rowdy kind. These were intellectual contests, riddles, oral history battles, impromptu poetry duels. Loser drinks again. Winner drinks first. Everyone wins. Historians still argue whether these drinks were truly intoxicating in the modern sense. Some believe fermentation was controlled to avoid drunkenness in diplomatic settings. Others claim intoxication was the goal, used to loosen lips, break tension, or reveal secrets. One record tells of a prince who confessed to sabotage over his second bowl of sorghum beer. He was forgiven, mostly because the king found his confession hilarious. Next, you offered zobo, a deep red hibiscus tea, tangy and slightly spicy, served cold. It's garnished with orange peel and a sprig of basil. The taste is sharp, floral, unforgettable. You sip slowly, letting the sourness tug at your tongue before giving way to sweetness. It's both a palate cleanser and a memory marker, something you'll taste again only in dreams. And finally, the rarest brew of all, a drink called Fura Spiritus, made from aged millet and infused with dried bark, lemon balm, and fermented honey. It's poured into a tiny carved horn, handed to you with both hands, and meant to be sipped facing west. You oblige. The flavor is quiet. It doesn't rush you. It waits, then settles deep in your chest like the memory of a lullaby you haven't heard since childhood. They say Fura Spiritus wasn't for sustenance, but for transition. Served to warriors the night before battle, to travelers the night before exile, and to kings the night before passing on their crown. The night feels quieter now. The stars blink slower. The drums have faded to heartbeat tempo. Your breath feels longer, deeper, as if your lungs just remembered how they're supposed to work. You place your empty calabash bowl on the mat, fingers warm, chest full. Royal brews weren't just for hydration. They were for preparation, for whatever came next. The silence after the brews is sacred. No clanging pots, no dancing pestles, just the sound of night insects rehearsing for their jungle orchestra. But the feast isn't over. Not quite. Because now, from the shadows, emerge 2 palace stewards, balancing long wooden trays covered with folded banana leaves. Inside each, forage treasures. You're about to discover the wild, seasonal, and often misunderstood side of the royal table, the forest dishes. These weren't the predictable courses of yam and rice. These were the edible surprises offered by the land itself. Snails plucked after the rain, mushrooms that only sprouted by moonlight, and herbs so powerful they came with whispered instructions. You unfold the leaf on your tray. Inside is a warm salad of wild greens, utazi, scent leaf, and tender vine shoots, sautéed lightly with palm oil, sprinkled with ground melon seed, and topped with something crispy you can't identify. The steward answers your unspoken question, termite wings. You blink. You chew. You blink again. Not bad. Mainstream historians often overlook this part of royal cuisine, probably because it doesn't come in shiny banquet platters. But the truth is, forage foods were deeply prestigious. Knowing what to gather, where to find it, and how to prepare it safely, that was a royal skill. And these ingredients weren't afterthoughts. They were chosen precisely for their rarity and their connection to the spirit world. Take the AWU mushroom, for instance. Found only in deep forest groves during harmattan season, it was used in palace broths and believed to promote clarity of thought. One king was known to eat it before major legal decisions. Griots say he never lost a case. Skeptical historians still argue whether it was the mushroom or his intimidating legal team. You try a bite of smoked snail, marinated in bitter leaf extract and roasted in its own shell. It's chewy, earthy, slightly metallic. A food that makes you think while you eat. There's no rush here. These are dishes meant to slow you down. Another folded leaf reveals roasted bush mango slices, dipped in chili lime paste and sprinkled with salt from the coast. The taste is wild, tart, hot, and addictive. A royal snack, once reserved for long evenings in the war room or post-hunt gatherings, when the king needed to unwind without numbing his senses. The most curious item of all? A small, charred root wrapped in palm frond. You're told it's isi, sometimes called royal firewood. Not actual wood, of course, but a type of yam root smoked until hardened, then shaved into shreds and steeped like tea. The flavor is bitter and complex, like burnt sugar and old soil. You sip the broth it creates, and it clings to your tongue like memory. And yes, there are superstitions. Some stewards claim forest dishes carry the voices of ancestors, that each bite draws you closer to the land's ancient memories. Others say they were used as love potions, or as tests. One king, suspicious of a foreign bride, fed her a dish made entirely of forest ingredients and watched to see if she flinched. She didn't. They were married by sundown. There's even a fringe theory that the arrangement of foraged items on a tray could be used as a coded message. Bitter leaves at the corners. Warning. Snails facing outward. Welcome. Mango in the center. A question. Historians can't prove this, of course, but some suspiciously symmetrical dishes from royal archives raise eyebrows to this day. You take a final bite. This one a piece of roasted noni fruit, blistered skin, soft flesh, tangy sweet funk that refuses to be ignored. You're not even sure you like it, but you respect its confidence. All around you, others are eating too. Quietly, thoughtfully. These are the dishes that don't shout. They whisper, and only if you're listening. The forest speaks through them. And tonight, you're finally fluent enough to understand a little of what it's saying. The tray is empty now. The banana leaf is stained with oil and juice, folded like a chapter just finished. The stewards collect it gently. These were not the glamorous dishes, but they were the wise ones. The ancestral ones. The dishes that reminded royalty not just of power, but of place. You lean back, stomach calm, mind sharper than before. You've tasted the forest, and it's tasted you back. You've eaten, you've drunk, you've wondered. Your feet are dusted with the earth of royal kitchens, your fingers still stained from palm oil and termite salt. And yet, there's one final aroma curling through the night. Sweet, smoky, unexpected. A kind of aromatic theater in motion. You're guided toward a low canopy where women in silk wrappers and heavy gold earrings hover over shallow iron pans. There are no roaring fires here, just embers, gentle and glowing. They are cooking the final act of the night, scented confections and edible perfumes. Yes, you heard right. Edible perfumes. Royal dessert wasn't always sugary or even particularly sweet. Instead, it was fragrant, designed to evoke mood, memory, even mysticism. This wasn't dessert to satisfy the tongue. This was for the nose, the breath, the skin. The first tray to arrive carries what looks like coiled ribbons of pale dough. You pick one up. It's warm, pliant, dusted in what appears to be finely ground rose petals and cinnamon bark. The taste? Barely sweet, but it melts into your mouth with the aroma of a midsummer garden and the faintest echo of nutmeg. One of the cooks explains that this is santi, a royal palace delicacy from the Sahelian courts, made with millet flour, date paste, and perfumed oils. The dough is kneaded with orange blossom water and slow-steamed over a pot lined with banana leaves and kola nut skins. It's not about sugar, it's about seduction. Mainstream historians often dismiss these dishes as women's food, not because of who made them, but because they were tied to feminine rites, fertility ceremonies, bridal baths, first moon feasts. But palace archives from Bornu and Kanem clearly list perfumed dishes on coronation menus, especially those meant to be eaten with bare hands and closed eyes. And then, the surprise, dun-dun blossoms. Not actual flowers. These are strips of fried yam soaked in a spice syrup made from star anise, honey, and clove-infused palm wine, then rolled in crushed sesame and hibiscus powder. You pop one into your mouth and it cracks softly, sending a warm flush across your face. Is it the spice, the heat, or the memory of everything you've tasted tonight coming full circle? Fringe scholars believe some of these dishes were medicinal, designed to calm the stomach, settle the nerves, and prepare the body for dreaming. One account claims that a Benin queen refused to sleep without a spoonful of perfumed porridge under her tongue, believing it guided her toward the wiser ancestors. Whether that's spiritual or just very dedicated aromatherapy, historians still argue. Next up, kuli dust. You laugh, because it's literally dust, ground roasted peanuts, toasted coconut, and cinnamon mixed with powdered sugar and a pinch of salt. It's sprinkled over your final dish. Scented rice milk, chilled and thickened with gum arabic and cassia oil. You sip it slowly. The texture is velvety. The taste is gentle. The aroma? Utter peace. And while you're still sipping, the steward pass around small bowls filled with nothing? Nope. Incense grain. Toasted grains infused with frankincense or sandalwood, meant to be chewed slowly and exhaled through the nose. It's part digestive, part breath freshener, part spiritual practice. The sensation is bizarre, a puff of woodsy air behind your eyes. You exhale. Somewhere, an ancestor nods. This final course isn't filling. It doesn't need to be. It's a reminder that food, at its highest form, is not just nourishment. It's sensation. It's ritual. It's the place where memory and mood meet, like steam rising from a clay bowl. And if you're wondering whether this course is still practiced today, yes, quietly, in wedding ceremonies, in rural kitchens, in small homes lit by oil lamps. These aren't Instagrammable desserts. They are lived in. They are loved. You glance down at your now empty plate. A soft trail of hibiscus powder marks your fingers. The scent will stay there for hours, maybe days. The cook leans in and says, "Now you carry the flavor." That's the royal way. You nod. You are not just full. You are scented. By now, your belly's full, your hands smell like clove and smoke, and your brain has gone pleasantly fuzzy from fermented millet, termite salt, and spirit tea. You'd think the royal kitchens were done with you. But no, they've saved one more marvel for last. The midnight snacks, stealthy, comforting bites shared in quiet corners of the palace, long after the banquet ends. You're ushered into a side corridor lit only by moonlight bouncing off whitewashed walls. A small door opens. Inside, a woman squats beside a three-stone hearth, toasting something flat and golden on a domed iron pan. Her movements are soft, like someone wrapping a baby. She glances up and nods. No words. This is not a place for talking. Welcome to the Whisper Kitchens. These weren't public palace kitchens. These were the secret ones, where queens, concubines, youngest siblings, and night guards all came together over bowls of comfort food, stolen between protocol and sleep. The dishes were simple, even humble, but their secrecy made them sacred. She hands you your first midnight bite, a folded masa, fermented rice pancake, still warm, brushed with shea butter and sprinkled with ground coconut and tamarind powder. The outside is crispy, the inside a soft cloud with a delicate tang. You take a bite. All tension vanishes. It's the food version of a lullaby. Mainstream historians mention masa as a daily street snack, but within royal walls, it had another identity: night food, meant to settle the stomach and keep you dreaming sweet. In some Fulani and Hausa courts, night meals were delivered to favored servants and secret lovers through quiet tunnels, wrapped in palm fronds. No fanfare, just comfort. Another snack arrives: roasted plantain slices glazed with honey and bush pepper. The contrast is addictive: sweet, spicy, smoky. A food meant for fingertips, not forks. You eat slowly. Every bite is a retreat from reality. And then comes akamu, or pap, a fermented maize custard warmed in clay pots and flavored here with ginger, alligator pepper, and a swirl of baobab pulp. It's thick, soothing, and slightly tart. You sip it from a good. Your shoulders unclench. Fringe oral accounts speak of a princess in Canaan who refused to marry until her suitor could make pap just like her nannies. He spent 6 months learning to ferment maize in the old clay pots. They married under a mango tree. Historians still argue whether it was love or just really good akamu. Some courts had a rotating midnight snack menu. Mondays, millet dumplings with pickled okra. Thursdays, leftover yam fritters soaked in chili oil. On feast days, leftover meat was wrapped in banana leaf and tucked behind the palace well, where only those in the know could find it. Culinary hide and seek. You're handed another treat: chin chin, tiny fried dough balls scented with lemon peel and nutmeg. Crispy, quiet, a snack you could eat without waking the palace. Some called them dream beads. Others, gossip food, because nothing spilled secrets faster than a warm bowl of chin chin shared at 2 a.m. Then, as your eyes start to drift shut, the woman places one last thing in your hand: a small piece of kola nut, soaked in clove water and dusted with lime ash. Not for hunger, for grounding, to end the meal, to tell your body you've had enough. Go rest now. The midnight kitchen fades behind you as you step back into the night. The stars are dimmer now, or maybe your eyes just heavier. A distant owl hoots. Someone hums a lullaby in a language you don't know, but somehow remember. Tonight, you've seen the grandeur of palace feasts. But here, in the shadows, you found something just as regal: intimacy, softness, sleep. You've tasted royalty. Now, it's time to rest like one. You don't walk now. You float. Through the palace halls, past the scent of burnt shea butter and the echo of drums long gone silent. Your feet remember the rhythm of yam pounders. Your fingers still trace the weight of calabash bowls. And your breath, it smells faintly of tamarind and hibiscus. But there's one final room. You're led into the heart of the palace archive, not of scrolls or crowns, but of flavor. Here, in clay jars, leather-bound menus, and bundles of dried herbs, the recipes of the royal kitchen are stored, not written, but remembered. This is the memory kitchen. A woman in royal blue sits cross-legged in the center, grinding something in a stone bowl older than any king. You watch as she adds pinch after pinch of dried petals, powdered charcoal, and what smells like cinnamon but probably isn't. This, she whispers, is not a recipe. It's a prayer. Royal kitchens didn't just feed bodies. They fed lineage, diplomacy, grief, and gossip. And here's where all of that is recorded, not by ink, but by taste. A particular blend of pepper and honey might mean peace treaty. A broth with oyster mushrooms and bitter gourd, airborne on a Tuesday. Every meal, a coded message. Every spice, a syllable in the royal language of the tongue. Mainstream historians recognize this kitchen's importance mostly through scribes' descriptions of feasts and guest accounts. But the real secrets, why one stew smelled like rain, or how long a particular leaf must be soaked to ease childbirth pains, those were never written down. They were passed mouth to mouth, hand to hand. One fringe theory even suggests the memory kitchen trained young princes, not to cook, but to interpret flavor as governance. If a dish tasted off, it meant a policy might be. 2. One bad peanut sauce. The council would call a second vote. Historians still argue whether this was true, or just the cooks getting sassy. You're offered a final taste, barely a spoonful. A reduction of palm sap, lemon bark, cola, and what you swear is ash from the fire that cooked your fufu. It's bitter, almost medicinal, then suddenly sweet. The kind of sweet that stays behind, waiting for the next moment of silence to rise up and say, "Remember me." This last taste isn't flashy. It doesn't sparkle, but it lingers. And that's the point. The woman gestures toward the back of the room, where shelves are filled not with cookbooks but with bundles of dried herbs wrapped in silk. Some have notes tied to them, for drought, for weddings, for when he does not return. The flavor archive isn't just about sustenance, it's about survival. These dishes held people together, during war, during coronation, during childbirth and betrayal and long, lonely nights. And now, here you are, holding the final spoon, listening to the last rattle of spice in the grinding bowl. You place it down, because it's time. Time to let the memory of this journey settle like smoke into your clothes. Time to let the sweetness and salt, the funk and fire, become dreams. Your guide nods once. You turn. The palace breathes behind you. Quiet now. Content. You walk into the dark. And now, we exhale. The drums are gone. The fires have gone out. Even the palm leaves have stopped rustling. And in the stillness, the flavors of the night settle into your body like stories being shelved for safekeeping. You feel the weight of the feast not as heaviness, but as comfort. Each taste you've carried, the smoke of camel meat, the perfume of cinnamon porridge, the whisper of termite salt, now curls into the edges of your memory like gentle fog. Nothing loud, nothing sharp, just warmth slowly folding around you. If you listen closely, you can still hear the distant hum of palace stewards packing away clay bowls and folded leaves. You can still picture the moonlight sliding across the stone floors. The way the midnight cooks smiled without speaking. The way a simple bite of fufu or rice milk felt like an invitation to stay just a little longer. You've seen more than a meal tonight. You've traveled through a palace where food was language, where flavors carried secrets, and where every bite was an echo of someone who came before. Now, your breathing slows. Your hands relax. Your eyes feel heavy, but in the best way, like they are being gently closed by soft wind. You are full. You are safe. You are remembered. Sleep well, traveler. End of script. Sweet dreams.